All right, welcome friends on YouTube and welcome friends on Zoom. We are going to today talk about understanding home inspections. For those of you who are live on Zoom, please feel free to just talk or ask questions, just chime in. You don't need to ask permission to interrupt me or anything because it's not a huge group. So our focus today is going to be on understanding home inspections and oops, sorry. And I think this is a really, really important subject. And I want, uh, it's important that you guys, can you guys see the screen? Am I sharing? I'm not sharing yet. I'm
No, I'm just seeing
No.
you. I'm just seeing you.
Yeah, sorry. Now can you see it?
Nope.
Oh, it was there a second ago. 1 second.
I get a blank screen is what I get.
Okay,
Double. Yep.
now do you see it?
Okay. Yep.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Tech, this tech. All right, so we're going to talk about home inspections. Let's dig right in. Welcome, everybody. As I said, just simply speak up if you have a question. Don't be shy, especially you, Adele. I know how shy you are. All right, so you guys took time out of your busy Friday afternoon to come here. What are you looking to get out of it? Somebody share something you'd like to learn today.
I just came in to see what you have to offer, and
Uh,
I'm right in between things, so it's a good thing to do.
well, that's very honest. The I hope to answer questions you might have about home inspections, and let's just dig in. What I want to cover in our time together is what is a home inspection and what is it not? Like a home inspection has both things that it really clearly is, and it has things that it clearly is not. So my expectation on this hour is to be able to talk about that. So you don't have a wrong expectation about what a home inspection is, what it doesn't do, what it does do. I want to talk about why buyers and sellers get them, order them. What is it bringing to their clients? I want to talk about general things to think about with a home inspection versus for me very specific things to think about. I want to talk about how do you choose a home inspector and evaluate them? How do you order it? How much does it cost? At the end of this, you should be prepared to help your buyers and sellers with all of this stuff. So, a home inspection is a report about the systems of the property, the electrical, the plumbing, and the heating, flooring, walls, doors, windows, the attic and crawl space, the foundation to a limited extent. It is also a report about the lot, a little bit about the lot and any detached buildings. You may also get information about them. It's also about the roof and gutters in many cases, not always, and also about the chimney or fireplace, if there is one, um, depending on the inspector. Um, Visible issues of condition will almost always be noted in a home inspection. So the way to think about it is it's a report about the systems of the house. A home inspection is not about structural wood damage caused by termites or other wood destroying organisms. So this is not about moisture damaging the structure. It is not about termites. If you want to get a report about that, you need to order a pest inspection or a structural termite inspection report. It is not a foundation inspection. So almost always these home inspectors, if they have anything to say about the foundation at all, it will be consult with a foundation inspector or a general contractor who does foundation work or a structural engineer. It is not usually including non-standard amenities. Like if there's a hot tub in the yard, it doesn't include that. If there is a sump pump in the basement or in the ground level so that water doesn't flood the area, it doesn't usually include an analysis of that. Many of our modern homes have irrigation systems. It does not include anything about those. Many of our modern homes have solar panels. It does not do anything about that, or alarm systems. So if it is anything in that realm, it usually isn't covered by a general home inspection.
What
Even
does cover that?
that you'd have to get a specialized inspection. It depends on which one.
Okay.
There are companies that know how to analyze all of these different systems. It gets very specific, and it's almost always going to cost more money. But if you have a buyer who really wants to know if that hot tub is working and in good maintenance, you have to call a hot tub maintenance company, for example. The other thing a home inspection isn't is a market valuation. It is not the same as an appraisal, and it is not going to tell you how much the home is worth. There's no discussion of market value or value in any respect in a home inspection. Another thing you need to know is that there are no guarantees or warranties associated with home inspections. The home inspector, whether he's in most cases, is doing a non-invasive study. They're not looking behind the walls. They're not looking behind heavy furniture. They're not pilling up carpets. So they do not guarantee the condition of the property where they can't see it. The other thing is, and they don't do any invasive work, but the other thing is that houses and properties are living organic systems. Now, I know that's kind of counterintuitive, but what is true today may not be true tomorrow. So, for example, the toilet is working fine today, and tomorrow it's all backed up and you need to call the plumber. Had the home inspector come out today, he would say the toilet's working fine. If he came out tomorrow, he'd say call a plumber. So they can only look at things in the state they are on the day they're there. So that's important for your buyers to understand. It's like a snapshot in time. Generally speaking, home inspectors will give you a sense of the variable likelihood of a system not performing as well in the future or breaking. But it on the day of is what they're reporting on. So for example, they may say this furnace looks great. It's 15 years old, but it looks great. I don't see any problems. And then the next day you have a problem with the furnace. So they don't guarantee that what they're saying is going to be true forever. That's, I think, it's true at that point in time, given the condition of the item. So why do buyers get them? Well, it's more obvious with buyers, right? They need to do their due diligence. They need to do their homework. And you, as their agent, want to make sure they do their homework. You want to make sure that buyers have the maximum amount of information about the condition and suitability of a property before they remove their buyer contingencies or even write the offer. So a home inspection gives buyers some insight into the condition of the property.
Do they verify square footage?
No, they do not. It is not a valuative tool. That an appraiser will verify square footage, but not a home inspector. That's a great question. Another value for the buyer of the home inspection is that if they are doing the home inspection during the escrow period, with or without an investigation contingency, it improves their negotiating power. It gives them more leverage to negotiate a change in the purchase agreement with the seller. So let's suppose they're in contract for $1 million and they do a home inspection, one was not provided by the seller, and they do their own home inspection and they find a major crack in the foundation that nobody knew about, wasn't disclosed. They could then go to the seller and say, listen, I'm going to cost me $100,000 to fix this foundation. I'll only buy your house for $900,000. And, with their investigation contingency in play, the seller might actually agree to that, knowing that if they go to market, they now have to reveal this foundation problem, and also knowing that it decreased the value of their home, even though they had a deal at $1 million. Buyers also get a lot of value out of home inspections of learning how their house works. Where is the sewer cleanout? Where is the shutoff for the water? How does the circuit breaker work? Those are just three very simple things. Good home inspectors provide lots of backup info to support what they're saying. And if you go on the inspection, if the buyer goes on the inspection, they can ask questions in real time about things they see. And that takes us to the next one, which is learning how to maintain the property. A good home inspector will give advice to the buyer about how to maintain the property after they buy it and how to maintain these aspects of the property that were inspected. In some cases, lender financing might require a home inspection. This typically happens if there is a down payment assistance program involved, where the buyer is getting a special secondary financing in addition to a first mortgage. It's extremely rare for the first mortgage lender to ask for a home inspection, but it is pretty common when you have down payment assistance programs. Why would a seller get one in advance of going on the market? Well, one reason is because it means the risk of buyer cancellation is reduced. If you can bring to bear in your disclosure package a home inspection, buyers will not only feel more comfortable writing an offer on your house, but they will not be surprised. If they do their own home inspection, there's much less likelihood of them finding something that the seller's home inspector didn't see rather. It happens, but it's less likely. So it creates an opportunity for you to say to your seller, listen, we want to get this in advance because it reduces the likelihood that we'll get into contact with a buyer and then they'll do inspections and find something and cancel. If we give them an inspection, our deal is a little bit more bulletproof. It's not guaranteed, but it's better. I actually had this happen to me early in my career. I told my seller, let's get a home inspection. Let's get a home inspection. He said, I don't want to do it. And in the end, the deal fell apart because the buyer found a problem with the foundation. It wasn't a crack. It was just a missing beam. And they just got scared and walked away.
I was going to say that's a good reason right there. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Good to know, right? Why else? Let's suppose a seller's prepping the property for market and they want to get top dollar. If they do a home inspection, they'll know what needs to be fixed, things that are actually broken, so they don't go on the market with broken things, or things that are suboptimal that would hurt their sale price. So it follows then that the existence of a home inspection as part of a disclosure package improves the marketability of the property. You can go to market and you can advertise it and you can say, the home inspection came back clean. It also, in a hot seller's market, we're not in a hot seller's market, but in a hot seller's market, it makes it a little bit more likely that you'll get what we call non-contingent offers. Non-contingent offer is where the buyer says, I've got all these reports from the seller. I don't need my own inspections. I will write non-contingent. Sellers love this because it means that the buyer's deposit is in play if the buyer cancels the deal. Whereas when you have a contingent offer, the buyer's deposit must be returned if they cancel as a result of exercising their contingency. If you want to learn more about contingencies, there's a whole class on my coaching channel on YouTube about contingencies, transaction contingencies. The other thing is, in the Bay Area, it is actually expected that sellers will do a pre-inspection. If it isn't there, it is almost a red flag. It is like, why? Why didn't the seller do it? Because it's so common now. Any questions about this? No? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So things to think about when you get these, when you start seeing them in disclosure reports. First of all, there's no standard format. Unlike a pest report, where there's state law that defines what the report has to include and how it has to look, these reports are all over the map in terms of how they're formatted and what they look like. It is a non-invasive investigation, as I said before. It is not always comprehensive. And what I mean by that is sometimes the inspector simply notes that they couldn't access the attic or they couldn't access the garage, or this room was closed and locked. We couldn't get into this bedroom. You need to look out for stuff like that. The other thing is a home inspector doesn't require any training or any licensing. Many people can say, I'm a home inspector. Let's suppose you're a general contractor and you don't want to do general contracting anymore. You can just set up shop and say, I'm going to inspect homes now instead. Now, that is certainly experience and a skill that a buyer might care for, but it may not be everything. There are home inspectors that understand code, understand current code, current building code, and understand lots of different home styles. So no two home inspectors are going to have the same set of skills. Some will be expert in some areas and some will be expert in other areas. One thing we do have going for us is that the better quality home inspectors are all members of a trade association. And there are 3 of them, 2 or 3 of these trade associations for home inspectors. And when I hire a home inspector I haven't worked with before, I certainly want to make sure that they belong to one of these trade associations, because presumably that means that they're at a minimum level of competence. They've taken some courses and they understand a certain minimum amount of stuff. Quite frankly, there are a lot of other things I would look for if I was checking out a new home inspector. It is really a very important choice. Most of your buyers will not have previous relationships with inspectors and be turning to you to recommend a home inspector, your sellers as well. And this is an incredibly important person, because if your inspector misses something, that's going to come back on you when you go to list the home. Or if you're a buyer agent and they move in, I've had it happen numerous times. The buyer comes to me and said, your inspector didn't see this and this. So you got to be really careful. Don't just work with just anybody that comes in and has a smiling face and a discount on the price. If it's a small condo, this sort of inspection takes about an hour, maybe less. But if it's a big house, you're looking at half a day. So plan accordingly. Whether it is a buyer or a seller client, but especially if it's a buyer client, you should be there for the inspection and your client should be there too. Now, in terms of seller clients, if you have a sophisticated seller who sold lots of homes, it is less critical that they attend the inspection. But somebody has to let the person in. So if the property is vacant, then you would be doing it anyway. More general considerations. There is no such thing as a home inspection report with 0 findings. Home inspectors always find something, even new construction, they find something. It's important that you know that these inspectors are usually not contractors, they're not structural engineers, and they're not repair people. Some of them may have some of that experience in their past, but that's not what they do now. And they should not be looked upon as having those skills. The other thing that's sad but true is that if you got 2 different inspectors who come out to the same property, they're never going to report the same things. They may have a lot of overlap and duplication, but I promise you that at least that each of them will each find things that the other person didn't report on. Also, you should know these inspectors do not provide pricing in their reports. There's no pricing. They won't tell you how much it'll cost to fix it. The better ones will tell you verbally, but you can't pin them down that they'll put it on paper. Sometimes we're representing a buyer for a hot property. You might want to do a pre-offer inspection for your buyer. If you want to do a pre-offer inspection for a buyer, that is totally a legitimate thing that happens. Usually, as a buyer's agent, you want the listing agent to sign off on it. And usually what they say is verbal only. The listing agent doesn't want something written down that they would then be obligated to give to all the other buyers. So you're usually looking at a verbal reporting mechanism there. And it's valuable to your buyer in a multiple offer scenario where there's going to be a lot of offers. It will increase your buyer's confidence to write a non-contingent offer if they do their own inspection before they write the offer. Even if the seller provided one, it can be a big difference maker. I've done it many times over my career, not a lot, but it certainly happened not infrequently. But as a buyer's agent, you have to advise your client that there's a financial risk because they could not get the property. Or maybe they could have gotten the property and negotiated an investigation contingency and thus not be of risking of losing that investment completely. So I typically tell my buyers, let's only do this if we're worried about writing with a contingency. And know that that money's going to go away. You're going to lose that money. It'll just be part of your housing investment if you don't get this property. So let's talk about some very specific things to think about. If you are representing a buyer and you're looking at a disclosure package, check the date on the seller's report. You would be surprised that some of these reports are 6 months old. That the longer into the past these reports are, this is not just true for home inspections, but for pest inspections and other physical site inspection reports. The older in time it is from the date you're looking at it, the less valuable it is in terms of the current condition of the property. When you're looking at these reports, note that kitchen appliance inspections are weak. They'll run a half cycle on the dishwasher. They'll open and close the fridge. They'll turn on the elements on the stove and turn on the oven. They'll maybe run the fan on the oven. But it's more or less that's all they'll do. So these are not thorough appliance inspections. Each report you get will say, we didn't inspect this, we didn't inspect that, we didn't inspect this. You need to know what they are when you're talking to your buyer or your seller. I recommend when you're reading these reports to focus on what is urgent or safety related or both. If it is not, if it is something that can wait, like a deferred maintenance item, you want to look at, when the item fails completely, is that going to create a safety issue, right? It says here, evaluate the relative importance of items on the report. That's for you in consultation with your buyer. But I do want to warn you, don't try to read your client's mind about what's important and not important to them. The best process here is have your buyer look at this and everything else in the disclosure package or everything else that they're looking at. And even if it's just a home inspection, maybe you ordered one for them as a buyer's agent, and ask your buyer what questions they have about the report. Did anything stick out to them as being of importance that they want to know more about, that they had concerns about? Do that first. Then once they've shared, then you can say, here are some additional things that I noticed as well. We want to avoid a scenario where we are just telling our buyers what's important versus what is not important, because you cannot read the minds of your buyers. And so you need to be cognizant of the fact that what might be important to your client may not be even on your radar, or something that is important to every buyer out there may not be the same. So that's why I say to do it that way. That's the first bullet point here. What is important for your client and what is less important. If you are a listing agent and you're advising your seller how to evaluate this report, what I basically say is, Mr. Seller, only repair or replace items that will make the home sellable or get you a higher price. If I can't answer yes to one of those questions, I typically tell my clients not to do the work. When are inspections unnecessary? The answer is never. It doesn't matter if the listing package has its own home inspection. It is always a good idea to inspect as to your buyer's satisfaction, that they feel they have done the adequate inspections and research on the property to satisfy them that the money they are investing in this property is being well spent. So I always recommend my buyers get their own inspections. And if they don't want to because they fear having an investigation contingency in a competitive environment and they're not prepared to do it before we write the offer, then I have a long conversation with them about the risk that they are taking, relying solely on the seller's inspectors.
Do you have a waiver?
Is there a waiver form? Yes, there's a form called the buyer inspection waiver that your buyer would submit with the offer saying, Mr. Seller, I have reviewed all of your reports and I've decided not to get any of my own. It goes with the contingency release. Great question. Sometimes people say, I don't need an inspection, it's new construction. You would be amazed at how sloppy the finishes are on new construction. I don't need to get an inspection. This property was built in 2005. There's no problem, or 2010. You'd be amazed at how quickly properties deteriorate, even if they were built in the last 20 years.
Not everybody's good at their job.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you pick a home inspector? So I recommend you research the inspector and their company. Nowadays, you can use Yelp. You can use stalk them on social media and find out what people have to say about them on various sites. You want to check out if they have any certifications and what does that certification mean? What have they had to do to get it? You want to look at a sample report. Is it easy to read? Is it going to be easy for your seller or your buyer or for listing buyer's agents to look at it? Big question for me. If I am going to get a report from you, how quickly am I going to get the written version? There are some old school inspectors out there who do an amazing job inspecting. They're really great with your client, but it takes them a week to get you the report. There's a trade-off there, right? There's a trade-off there. If you need the report the next day, make sure you pick the inspector who can promise you next day delivery. Another thing with inspectors is how do they take payment? You know, we're seeing more and more vendors taking Venmo and Zelle, but not all do. Some want old-fashioned paper checks, and many do not take credit cards. These are small businesses. But slowly it is getting better. This was more of a problem 5-10 years ago than it is now. More and more of my vendors are taking Zelle or Venmo. So maybe it's not as bad as it used to be, but you should always check. Question for you to ask your inspector. Will they be available after the inspection for you and your clients? Are they like a phone call away, right? That's very important for me. If I have a follow-up, maybe the report, I get the report and there's a mistake in it, I need to know they're going to fix it really quickly because I often need that report on a timeline to get it into my disclosure package or to get my contingency release discussion happening. So if there's a mistake, I need it corrected. But not only that, your buyer buys the house, they used Joe Smith inspector that you recommended, and then they move in and they forget something that they thought was very important that he said about the furnace. Can they phone him and find out what he had to say about the furnace? Wasn't in the report, couldn't find it in the report, something like that. You also want to find out what is their reputation and experience in the geographic region where the house is. Sometimes you will have inspectors who claim to go anywhere, but who really do 95% of their business in one market, like say, Oakland, but they don't know anything about the peninsula. And, even though it's all the Bay Area, there is a remarkable divergence in the style and age of housing stock in different areas. So, one of the things I would ask is, have you had any experience inspecting Victorian homes from the 1890s? If I was selling a home in West Oakland, say, that was of that nature, right? If I was on the peninsula or in parts of Berkeley, do you have experience looking at Eichler style homes? It's a very popular style. You don't see as many of them in Oakland. Another advice I have for you is, earlier in my career, I had some inspectors who terrified my clients. Whether they were buyers or sellers, just the way they talked about things was so cautious as to come across as alarmist. And, they can destroy a deal, these guys. And sometimes it is caused by, let's be really be really nice about it, undue caution, or not undue caution, but excessive caution, not to open themselves up to saying something that, to making a definitive claim. So you got to find a balance. But you don't want your inspectors doing anything in unethical or anything like that. But you also don't want them making mountains out of molehills, if I may say so. So be thoughtful. The other thing about this is, your inspectors, talk to them a little bit before you book them, ideally. Or when you start working with them, find out if they're friendly and informative, or are they loner types who don't talk with anybody? They just do their thing. Will they let your clients shadow them as they go on the roof or go under the house? Will they want to work solo? How friendly are they? How informative are they? Those are helpful things in building a long-standing relationship with your own preferred inspectors. Ordering and pricing. So the first rule of this is, order as early as possible in the process for both your buyers and sellers, because the good inspectors book weeks in advance. You can usually order nowadays on their web portal, but phoning them often works just as well. Many of them will have different options for the report style. They'll say, do you want my full comprehensive version of my report, or do you want the summary version? And there'll be price differentials. If I'm working with a seller, I'll probably go for the summary version. If I'm working with a buyer who's a first-time buyer, I might want the comprehensive version. So prices have gone up for home inspections. That low-end price here, $400, is really more for condos now. If you want a house inspection, you're looking at $600 and up. So allow for that. And normally this is paid by the client outside of an escrow process, a direct payment. So it is a non-refundable expense. It is not something that can, if a buyer gets one and then they cancel the transaction, they're not going to get this back.
They do have the option to sell that to the seller, though.
The
report.
Well, I've never seen that. I've seen it given to the other side.
I've heard that from somewhere.
Yeah, the contract says that a buyer's agent may not withhold the report of their inspector from the listing agent. So I don't know about selling them. But they could sell them to another buyer, I suppose.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure the contract requires that they be shared. The other thing you want to make sure when you're ordering is, how long are you going to take to get me my written report? That's very important. Know that before you sign, before you order it. Now, you've ordered the inspection. You're not actually done yet. Before the inspection happens, there's at least these 4 things to think about. Number 1, you want to make sure that if there's personal property on site, that it isn't blocking access to anything. You want all the garage electrical panels, water heaters, access panels for crawl spaces, access panels for access hatches for attics, rear yard fencing. Ideally, you don't want anything blocking the visibility or access to these things, because otherwise your inspector's going to say, I couldn't inspect that. They're not about to move things. They're not about to go into the closet and remove all the clothes and the boxes of pictures from 30 years ago to get into the attic or to get down to the crawl space. If you are representing either a buyer or a seller, make sure that the power, gas, and water are on, and so the inspector can inspect properly. If the water is off or the power is off or the gas is off, you will have a suboptimal result. You might have to bring the guy out at an additional expense. So make sure. Some owners of property actually put locks on things. They lock up the water heater closet, they lock up the crawl space hatch, and they lock their electrical panel. And sometimes there are people living in the house who lock their rooms. So any locked access, you want it unlocked for the day of the inspection so the inspector can get in and do their thing. If you are a listing agent, it is your responsibility before your inspection or the buyer's inspection or both to make sure the water heater is braced for earthquake and that all the carbon monoxide and smoke detectors are appropriately in place where they need to be. By the way, guys, this is not a negotiable item. The contract, the California real estate law requires that sellers do this for every closing. All right, so does anybody have any questions?
You mentioned that some home inspectors, they have a certain, was it like a qualification that
A trade, they belong to a trade association.
a trade association? Can you elaborate more on like what that is and where in the report we can look for that?
Yeah, because these contractors are not required to be licensed by the state or by any governing authority, they organized into groups for the benefit of making themselves a more professional. And many of these inspectors pay a fee every year to belong to a trade group, which is, there's several of them. California Association of Home Inspectors, CAHI is one of them. ASHI, America Home Inspection Inspectors, something. There's a bunch of them. And when you join one of these groups, you are expected to be current on the education around the building codes and around standards of practice, best practices, and including best reporting practices. You're expected to be doing continuing education to maintain your membership. I am not an expert on all the different requirements of membership in each of these associations, but for these guys who do home inspection professionally, it's just part of doing business. So they get these accreditations, if you will.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? I do encourage you to make sure you're comfortable when you have your first opportunity to hire an inspector that you come back to this and you use this as a guide to make sure that you hire someone who will be suitable for your client. All right. The last thing I want to do is if you are interested in getting your own copy of this presentation, there's a QR code I just put on the screen. I'm just going to make it big here. But if you take a picture of it with your phone, you can get a copy of this presentation from my assistant. She'll send it to you.
Stephen, I have a question.
Oh, please ask. Just ask away.
So I'm looking at the have any disclosures, no inspections, and it says it will be an as-is sale. So would I be correct in assuming that the property probably needs a lot of work, which might be one of the reasons that they didn't do it? Because it was tenant occupied for a while, and it says that the seller has never
Live there, right?
lived in it.
Yeah, I would never make any assumptions.
Uh,
I think it's a good presumption, but I
Okay.
wouldn't assume it. All the more reason why you need a home inspection if you buy it with a contingency period. But as is a very meaningless term. And if someone puts it in as an addendum, a term of an addendum or a counteroffer, it's kind of
Mhm.
funny because the contract already in print says that it's an as-is sale.
Mhm.
As-is sale, some sellers and some sellers' agents think that as-is means is that the seller doesn't have to do any work on the property. It certainly means they don't want to. But
Right.
please remember that everything is negotiable. And if you buy the property for a certain price and then you find out something that the seller did not disclose, there's still room for negotiation there to say to the seller, I don't care that it's an as-is sale. I bought this property expecting the foundation to be solid. And when I did my inspection, I found this big crack. So I'm really sorry. I don't need your guy to repair it, but I do need him to give me 75,000 off the price so I can get it fixed. That's perfectly legitimate. But it does not mean that the seller is basically protected from ever doing any renegotiation. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up. Oh, I'm selling it as is. I'm not going to have to renegotiate anything. And it doesn't work that way. Things are always negotiable until either the deal falls apart or it closes. Even at the end of the day, you're 2 days away from closing, something comes up, there might need to be a negotiation to get it resolved.
Okay, so my
Well,
guidance to the client, would it be if we were to write an offer, it would be contingent on the inspection, and then like we can go from there and see if there's any negotiation?
Yeah, but
Okay.
I would advise you to write a much broader investigation contingency for all
Okay.
aspects of the property, not simply physical inspections. But yeah, absolutely. You would never write, if the seller disclosure package doesn't have inspections, it's a rare situation where you would write non-contingent. You would almost always write with a contingency.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question.
If you're listing the property, you have to advise your client that's not probably going to give you your best price for your home.
Absolutely. That's the other side of the coin. Sellers think, oh, I don't want to do my own inspections. Let the buyer do their own inspections. And that's where I talk to them about bulletproofing their listing. How we want to do these pre-inspections so that not only do they get the best price because they've disclosed or fixed what is known about the property, but a buyer knows what they're buying right from the get-go and is less likely to ask for a renegotiation. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate you all making time to be with me today, and I look forward to seeing you all soon, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.